because there's so many media markets, some of which are very expensive. But Southwest Florida is a bastion of Republican votes. And if that area is impacted severely, I'll add another piece. People disperse to other parts of the state or other states in general. It could suddenly get very interesting politically down there. And the Harris campaign, we talk about how much money they have. That Senate race has tightened pretty considerably. Rick Scott, who's a billionaire, put in another 20 million of his own dollars recently. That is not because he thinks he's cruising to victory and he wants to run the score up. It's because he sees the same thing. So, it's interesting to see, if you're the Harris campaign, how closely, you feel like you're getting down there. You also have a marijuana ballot initiative and an abortion ballot initiative, right, both of which should play well for you. And, it should tell you everything that Trump came out for the marijuana ballot initiative and was kind of tap dancing on the abortion. They don't know what that turnout is going to look like down there. I think both those will pass. And, are there coattails?
Yeah. Lastly, I'll get to, let's open this up for questions. But the other question I asked Haley was, what reliability and fidelity should we have in North Carolina polls going forward, considering 61% of the affected counties are pro-Trump? And he said, not much, right? You think about that. No one's around to answer a poll anymore. And so if you think about North Carolina, the data coming out now, and I was sort of, again, I as a pollster, I thought he'd say, oh yeah, you could still count on it because we can figure this out. And I mean, right, that's their job. Yeah. But the honesty is important, because it's sort of like, for the last several miles of the trip, we're going down blindfolded on a key battleground state and just not knowing who's up. This is going to be important. All right, let's get to some questions, since I have no idea who anyone is. I'm just going to start going down the list. Russ, can you unmute? Tell everyone why you like me the best, or I can't remember how Mark does it. I think that's it. How you like me the best and who you're voting for. Russ, do I do this? Ask to unmute. Russ, unmute.
I am about to spotlight Russ for you.
Okay.
Hello, Russ.
There we go. How you doing, guys?
Good, Russ.
I tell you, I had the unfortunate experience of having to view it on YouTube last night, and that is a rough platform. I'm kind of interested in the ads that I'm seeing.
People in for Sean.
I'm kind of interested in the ads that I'm seeing for both Harris as well as Trump here in Missouri. I mean, Missouri's way red, so I don't know if she's trying to get here in the Kansas City area, whether it's Nebraska.
You've seen her ads?
Oh yeah. There and I was down in Wichita over the weekend, and I saw ads down there as well. So either they got just an abundance of cash, or they think certain things are in play. So the question that I had for each of you, and we've gotten to the stretch of the race where it's promises every day, right? So, lots of promises going back and forth. But my question for each of you, Sean for Trump and Dan for Harris, what is the first thing they're going to do? Whether it's an executive action, whether it's hopefully legislation. What is day one, what they're going to do? So not day 100.
Hi, this is one of the producers. I'm so sorry to interrupt.
Hey,
I just wanted to let you know. Yes, I just wanted to ask if it's okay if we run into overtime today.
Audra, you're on the
half hour.
We can all hear.
Audra, we can hear you.
It's fine with me. I'm already at work, so
that's
you guys
exactly
can
what
go
I meant
as long
to
as you need.
No, it's okay. Just guys, keep going for another 20 minutes if you have time.
We're
you don't
good.
have to
We're
leave.
good. Yep.
This
Thank
is
you.
how the magic works.
But
Very
that's my
high-tech.
question is, so day one,
Yeah.
what's the first thing?
Yeah, I'll answer this quick because I was there in 2016. Legislation is time consuming and deal making, whatever. So to your point, you're going to see executive orders and actions. There's two separate ones. I would imagine, I'll let Dan speak to Harris. But Trump's going to do what he said. He's going to do the border. He's going to do something about drilling and U.S. production. I mean, my guess is there might be 15, 20 that Trump would do right off the bat. We did a bunch. I think Biden did like 45 his day
Yeah.
one. We did like 26. It's the new name of the
So
game.
specifically with his promises. So
Right. No.
he
So like I
promised
said, he's going to do,
deportation. So
he'll
his
do,
deportation,
right.
do
So
the deportations start day one?
Yeah, there'll be something. I mean, here's the dirty part about your question, Russ. There is some things that you can do right off the bat, and you'll sign an executive order saying all agencies shall now do X. There are some things that will take a little bit longer because they require more coordination, right? I've got to get this department to tell this department to tell this department. So you'll probably have a series of announcements. Like, I have directed the Department of Homeland Security to begin this, this, and this. Then you will have a series of executive orders that will say an order effective immediately. The Department of this will now do the following, and actions similarly. But so you're going to get a lot, but some of it just has to do with how government works and the processes that ensue. And so on day one, you can announce that you've started certain processes, but you can't. We got a lot of when we did that travel ban. One of the problems, and I know I got a call from Dan's old colleague on the Hillary campaign, Governor McAuliffe at the time, and he said, "Sean, I got people at Dulles Airport that don't know what to do," and da 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 da. And it happened so quickly that the wheels didn't know how to one wheel wasn't going at the same time the other wheel was going. And so I'm trying to answer your question by saying I think you'll see a lot of action on his promise to secure the border and on immigration. You'll see a bunch on energy and drilling, but it's going to come down to how quick these things can segue with the way that government works. So he might come out and say, I have ordered that the Department of the Interior allowed drilling on these sites, or the Department of Energy or whoever's in charge of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to start buying oil at this price. There are things, though, that you can't, that might take a week to go. Is that, and so.
Yeah, I mean, I would say the same thing. I mean, look, to Sean's point, there's the performative side of the job, right? So it used to be that if a Republican followed a Democrat day one, they would revoke, what is it, the Mexico abortion
Right.
that
Policy.
provided, funds for overseas healthcare. And if a Democrat came in, they would reauthorize it. If Harris wins, I imagine she will do something on abortion on day one. She probably would do something also on immigration, right? Just to show like she meant what she said. Even potentially on fracking. Like, I could see her wanting to kind of, show that. You want to show action. But to Sean's point, like, it takes even, weeks for your own personnel to get in there, to be clear, to be able to execute. And if you think about, and I'm not sure if this is where you're going, like, Trump's first big thing, try to repeal the ACA and then the tax cut bill. For Obama, it was the Green New Deal, or cap and trade, they called it then. And then healthcare. You started them in the spring, and the ones that got over the finish line were about the following February. So it takes a long time because you have to work with Congress. So if Harris has a Republican Senate and a Republican House, that is a very different situation about the art of the possible than if one is Democratic. Conversely, this is probably the more likely scenario. If Trump were to win and have both the House and the Senate, now they can get creative, and you have to figure out what are you going to burn your capital on, because you only have so much.
Right. And so, Russ, the transition period is going to be when these guys, you'll hear a lot about this. Put it this way, it's not going to happen on day one in a vacuum, right? So
from a metric standpoint, look at the first 100 days, not the first 10.
I would look at where are you at Labor Day, and where are you by the following April? Because if you haven't gotten stuff, then the midterms kick in, primaries start that following winter, right? And if, like, on the Trump side, if you have the White House, the House, and the Senate, Democrats will be very bullish in 2026.
Yeah, and let me back it off the other way, right? You have a current vice president, so she's well integrated into the current system, and then Trump, who's a former president. So by December 15th, maybe depending on some of the personnel announcements, you'll start hearing definitely by January. If it's Kamala, I think to Dan's point, you're going to hear some carry-on stuff because it's her current administration, so she's not going to undo all the Biden stuff.
There's nothing she'd do differently. So
right, nothing she'd do differently. If it's Trump, I think in January you start hearing, here's all of the things I'm going to do day one. Here's what I'm going to do, and so they'll lay out those agendas. I don't think anything will be a huge surprise on day one. Anyway, thank you for the question, Michael Caliendo. Come on in, unmute yourself. I think that's.
Okay.
Maybe
Good morning, everybody.
Hey.
Good morning.
Hey, good morning. Enjoy the show. Quick question.
Who are you voting for?
That's right. And where are you
Why am I
from?
the best?
Okay, so I voted for candidate Trump in 16, for President Trump in 20, and I'll vote for Trump again this time
Where
around.
do you live?
I am in a suburb of Indianapolis,
Okay.
a pretty red state. Question is about the VP selection for Vice President Harris. Personally, I was surprised by picking someone that wasn't from Pennsylvania or an Arizona or Georgia. And part of the arguments I've heard that perhaps made some sense were, she might have wanted somebody that would not overshadow her. Fair enough. But you can't tell me that there weren't other people such as Shapiro or Kelly, et cetera, from those states. My gut reaction to the pick, and this is what I'm asking, I'd love your opinion on, is some concern at that time, probably looking at their own internals, saying that blue states such as Minnesota could be in trouble. I mean, why did you pick somebody from the only state that voted for Mondale in '84? I mean, that one kind of threw me. I mean, that's the question. I enjoy both of you guys. Sean, I'll tap you on the shoulder for that one. But Dan, I think you do a fine job representing. And I love the intelligence of the program. And of course, I love all of the questions coming from the audience. It really makes the show. So I'll listen to your answer. Thank you.
Yeah, no, and thank you for joining and for raising your hand. Look, I think in the last few election cycles, you've seen presidents or candidates who have picked vice presidents, not because they bring a state, right? Trump wasn't going to lose Indiana. Obama wasn't going to lose Delaware. But you look at who do you get along with the best. And in Harris's case, I think we need to be, kind of fair to her. It was a crazy compressed schedule. I mean, that process usually is a 4 to 6 month process where law firms do months of vetting. Your team interviews the candidates. You interview the candidates. You huddle with your team. You do more interviews. You would even have them like Trump, it was almost like an audition. He would send them out on the trail. He would have them with him on the trail. Do we have chemistry? Do I like how they talk about this? She had none of that. I mean, she basically got the vet on a Thursday night. She sat down with them on Saturday, or I think it was Sunday, and made a decision by Monday because you needed 24 hours to literally build the website and put your talking points together. Mark Halperin has talked a lot about Josh Shapiro, that, there was tension there. He had a lot of questions about what his role would be. Did he really want the job based on what she said? Some of the other candidates, I know they didn't pass the vet, right? So there's things in people's past. In the past, people have had problems with domestic help, extramarital affairs, stuff like that. I'm not saying that was specific to any one candidate, but those are things that have tripped up people in the past. And so I think, Walz kind of got hot at the right time. He's like a baseball team going into the playoffs where he was hot. He had good interviews. The whole weird, comment went viral and Democrats were loving it. And, they thought he would be a great surrogate. And she apparently really got along with him. It sounds like in the interview, he was like, I'll do whatever you want me to do. You don't want me in the room to make a decision? Fine by me. Go get it. You want me to go run through the brick wall for you? Put me in the game, coach. So, I'll cut her some slack that it was a very, very compressed schedule. But look, if she loses and it comes down to Pennsylvania, you won't hear the end of it. But I'll just also add quickly, the one thing about Shapiro, let's say he did want it and he did pass the vet and everything was kosher. The big worry was that he is Jewish. This was going to set off the Arab Americans in Michigan, and you would have a party at war with itself. And she didn't want that headache. And I understand some pretty senior Democrats counseled her you don't need this. Like, you don't need the headache. Who knows if they'll be proven right?
Yeah, I agree with most of what Dan said. I mean, look, you're looking for a buddy. This is the one person that, if you're president, it's a very, very lonely job, and you need somebody that you can count on, that you can rely on, that's got your back, that you feel gets you, that isn't going to rival you. And as to Dan put it, like, this was an unbelievably compressed schedule. And so there's a million things that are going on. And I mean, literally imagine it was like an arranged marriage, right? Imagine somebody walking in and saying, here are your 4 choices on a Friday. You're going to meet with them tomorrow, and on Sunday's the wedding. It's just like, I hope I like them. And also I just don't, I think that it is better to have good chemistry than anyone trying to believe that there's an electoral advantage, right? It doesn't, too many people put too much stock in the VP electorally. It just doesn't matter. You'd rather have somebody that gets your base fired up, that can raise money, but that, more importantly, for 4 years is going to have your back. They are your number one surrogate and ally. So I think that we will, if she loses the race, they will be second guessing this forever. I'm not sure that that's right or wrong, because I don't think Shapiro was the silver bullet. I think he would have been good, but I also don't know. I mean, you sit down in a room with somebody. I always say that there's friends versus roommates, right? There are people that you're buddies with, and that you go, would I want to live with that person? And, and I also say the same thing about bosses, right? You meet somebody and you're like, God, I love that guy. I'd never want to work for him. And I think that in the case of Shapiro, a lot of us on the outside look at a guy, look at his resume, look at how well he's done in Pennsylvania, and go, oh, that makes sense. But we're not the ones who have to sit with him every day. And even if you or I would have gotten along with him, maybe she didn't, right? It's a personality driven issue. So for those reasons, I think that was it. Anyway.
Just a parting comment on that. I appreciate the perspective. It seemed to me that you could get below the level of a Shapiro or a Kelly in Arizona, et cetera. You could get below that and find more than 1 or 2 other decent candidates. Appreciate the fact that the vetting process was really compressed.
And
I
if you
think
had another month,
electorally,
maybe.
there should have been some thought to that. And I still walk away feeling like there was something else in their own internals that was saying, we got to protect, we don't have a ground game in Minnesota. We've never needed one, right? We got a ground game in Pennsylvania. We got a ground game in North Carolina, et cetera. And in Arizona, we can fight those battles. We really can't fight it. We can't let a firewall state like that fall. So purely
Who knows?
speculation.
And again, maybe that was in their head. We won't know until there's a book that comes out afterwards with all of the people leaking about it. So all interesting. I think that the other, remember when we talk about the timeline, there literally was a nomination process. They had to get a name up into the DNC to allow that to happen. So appreciate the question.
Victory has 1,000 fathers. Defeat is lonely orphan.
Christopher Pape. I hope I'm saying your name right. I want to wake you up. Can we bring Christopher in? Christopher, where are you? Who did you vote for? And why do you like Dan? Oh, you gotta unmute yourself.
Or not. Feedback's a gift.
You got that? You unmuted, Dan? Or Christopher? Sorry, I'm reading the wrong name on one.
Hi, can you hear me
There
now?
you go. Yep.
There we go. You did get my name right, which is, very few people do, so thank you.
Well.
I live in Manhattan, in Sutton Place on the East Side, and I'm in media, so I'd rather not say who I'm voting for. My question was going to be for Mark more than the two of you, but I think that I'd be interested to hear your answers. I just think that we're at such a tipping point on how biased the media is. And how can we go, if Trump wins, I just don't, I'm working with other journalists. I'm really not, I'm in the lifestyle space, so I'm not in the political space. I just don't know how people could be so biased.
You are if you're in the lifestyle space. You're very much,
What do you mean though about the media? Do you mean the proliferation of it?
No, I mean mainstream media is so biased. It's
right.
So clear.
Okay.
And how can they continue to I just don't know why no one says we want to be neutral. We could
Right.
just want to present news.
Dan,
And
this is your favorite question. Do you want to take it from?
Yeah. Well, I mean, on some level, like ask CNN how that's gone, trying to be, neutral a little bit. But I mean,
Right.
I'll say two things politically. One, I think it'll be interesting to see the shape of the mainstream media in 4 years, right? People are cutting, are leaving television, they're hemorrhaging cash, they're going through layoffs, like there's talent turnover left and right. So what do they look like when the next presidential election rolls around? Two, I think one of the lessons that's going to, be taken away, at least from the Democratic side, is the success that Trump has had going on these niche podcasts, going to these different unique audiences where it is 4 million 18 to 35-year-old men who are religious in their, listening or viewership. And I think you're going to see a lot more of that. I think you'll have debates, moderated by some of these niche, hosts. I think you'll see less of like, you have to go kiss the ring of the New York Times and you have to go sit for Meet the Press. Like, I think that's kind of ending. And so I think as media fragments and as, people kind of settle into their preferred place of getting entertainment, you're going to see politicians now, trek to the same places.
Yeah, so I'd say two things on that. One, I'd associate myself with what Dan said, right? I mean, you're seeing a lot of these people. Look at her media tour, right? The Call Her Daddy, The View, which is technically TV. I mean, it's not news, but then Colbert, Howard Stern, Trump going to Theo Von, the Nelk Boys, these live things with Elon. I mean, look, it was funny. I gave a speech down in Florida a couple months back and at a journalism school, and they asked me like, what do we think about journalism dying or whatever? And I said, it's not dying, it's flourishing. Look at this. Look at what we're doing today, right? These morning meetings used to be network controlled. Like the networks would hold one, no one could see it. We're doing it. Thousands of people every morning are engaged in this. Substack, you see the reporters right, left going off, and it's hardcore reporters from the Washington Post, the New York Times, who are saying, I want to report. And if you like them, if you think they're good reporting, you pay them $5 or $6, $7 a month. If you want to join, I'm not a journalist, but I have a show every day. I have a Substack. You want to come see my content? Great. But 10 years ago, if somebody had said, hey, Sean, do you want to go do a daily show? It would have been a hobby, not a living. And we're seeing the proliferation of media in a way that we never have. And Dan's right. Between this cycle and next cycle, you're going to see, hosts hosting things and doing things that they never have before. When I was at the RNC in 12 and then 16, it was a battle to get credentials for non-legacy media types, right? Because it was always handled through the Congress, the House and Senate periodical galleries. And now, this year, they were reaching out to influencers and content creators and saying, come on. So I think the answer is the media has done, the legacy media has hurt themselves, right? They because they've gone in a certain direction, they have every right to do that. But then other people are going, great, I'll go put a channel together for content that I believe in. If you want to watch my show every day at 6 o'clock, you can. If you don't have to. If you want to come on two-way and be part of our conversation, you can. That's the beauty of what technology has provided. This is this proliferation of sources. If you trust someone, if you don't trust them, you tune them in, you tune them out. But, to Dan's point, look at the salaries that they're now talking about for these hosts, right? They're just cutting, they're cutting and cutting and cutting. There's a lot of talk about ABC going up for sale, all these other sites going down, but this is capitalism. People are saying, I don't want this. I want to watch this, and I'm going to go get my news and information here. The media has done this to themselves. And so I think that it's actually, I love what's happening. It's very disruptive. It's kind of like what Uber did to the taxi system, with Door. I mean, like, the environment has allowed this to proliferate, and I think it's a very healthy thing. So thank you for your question.
Thank you.
You bet. Brandon Utterback, sir, come on in. Tell me where you are and who you're voting for.
Hey, how's it going? There I am.
Good.
Hey, I'm in Northwest Indiana. I've never voted before. I was very, caught up in the Bernie mania, maybe when back in the day, and now I'm going to vote for Trump. Becoming more solid every time I watch a Kamala Harris interview. I just, one thing I saw that when they unsealed that document, I thought it was going to be bigger news than it was. So I quickly went to my number one news source, which was two-way, and it wasn't even mentioned. I didn't know if that
Which
court filing
document?
being
Sorry, can you?
the court filing about January 6th.
Okay. Yep.
When they unsealed that, I thought it was our October surprise or bombshell. I was wondering why that hasn't reverberated that much. And then the next question is, does the lack of Kamala going into more aggressive interviews, it carries more weight with me considering the campaign management team that she has and how savvy they actually are, and kind of an all-star lineup. If she was ready for that moment, I'm guessing they would be sending her in there rather than this is just an inexperienced campaign. They're just trying to feel it out. And then if I could just throw one more question out there to you guys, what do you think is the number one thing that people who aren't in the loop, like Mark degrading the betting markets, because it's people who have no insider information. What is the number one mistake you think people outside the loop make when viewing? Is it like because the body language, or they don't seem confident, or anecdotal sort of things? What's like the number one thing that we don't know that you guys do?
Well, that's a great question. Real quick, are you registered to vote? You mentioned you are Bernie. I mean, and so,
Yeah.
so you haven't voted in the past, or did you vote for Bernie?
No. My goal was to vote for somebody I really believed in. I didn't agree with a lot of his policies.
Right,
and,
but did you actually cast a ballot for him?
No, because I was.
Okay.
Yeah,
and
I
are you
wasn't
registered to vote?
Yes, I am.
Okay. Thank you.
I'm in Indiana, so but
it's always important to vote. Dan, you want to take that?
Sure. So, I mean, I'll take him. I think in order. If I miss something, let me know. Look, I think as far as January 6th goes, and this is obviously this comes up on this show a lot. It's in the chat, both here and on YouTube a lot. Like, why don't we talk about it more? I don't think there are many people at this point who don't have an opinion about that day, where you're going to read something and say, oh my goodness, like, the images were so striking, right? In my opinion, it was horrific. And you have formed a judgment, right? And so if we talk about it, we're always happy to answer people's questions about it. But I think, in the big picture, even in the national news, news publishes what they think is going to get clicks or people are going to buy the paper. And at this point, the cake is fairly baked on that. I mean, I think it's even like Bob Woodward's book, right? Like, okay, so we talked to Putin, like, I find it troubling, but I think a lot of people kind of have an opinion about Trump and Putin at this point. Your next question, I forget what your next, you had three.
Oh, Kamala's like lack of media.
Yeah. It's a great question. I mean, David Plouffe and others, Stephanie Cutter are some of the smartest people in the party. I don't know why they made the decision they did. I thought that going into the Biden's first debate, Harris was doing a lot of interviews. I actually thought one of her best interviews she's done as vice president was the night that Biden really fell apart. She went on TV after that debate and defended him, defended the campaign, and was good. She pivoted right back. Like, she had entered, like, the fact that then, like, I cut her slack. The first 2 weeks, you're doing your tour, you announce your VP, like, you're filling arenas, like, ride that wave. But then I thought she would jump into this. And to your point, like, why they didn't, I'm sure in Mark Halperin's book, we are going to hear all about, why that happened. But, as I said to start the show, if I were them, keep doing these. She's getting better. And I think people will appreciate it and respect her.
We're good. We got a couple more questions we're going to get to, and then I promise you, I know we started late, so just bear with us, but we want to be respectful because I know a lot of you waited with us patiently, and thank you for that. So we're going to get a couple more people in. Real quick, I'm going to answer, Brandon. One, I think Dan's right? What are you going to learn about Trump that you haven't already? And the shock factor has gone down so much. That's number one. Number two, I agree with him mostly on Kamala, although I do think, that these people around her are smart. They see her strengths and weaknesses. And so they're basing what they're willing to do on. They can't send her out and have her fail, because then she'll look at them and say, why did you make me do that? So they're smart people. They know what they're doing. And then last, the one thing I would just say that I thought you asked a really good question. Unfortunately, we don't have the time to go into this tough, but what are the things that we know? And I think like anything else, right? If you're a soccer player, my old coach used to say when I was in high school, like part of the reason we practice is so that you see a scenario and you know how to react, right? When you've gone through several campaigns and you've watched things, right? You know how an ad's going to affect things. You know how spending here or visiting this is going to do stuff. You get better at what you do. When you're a professional in any industry, and I think because of time and grade, there are things that we've seen and done where you go, yeah, putting out that fundraising piece is going to have a backlash, or we're going to get caught on this, or we can't do this ad like this because this is going to this is the reaction that's going to happen. So that's number one. Number two is I would just say data drives a lot, right? And so I used to tell my folks they used to hate this phrase, but I'd say data doesn't lie. Right. So I can tell you, I love this ad, or I think this is good. And if the focus group and the data responses come back and it says it sucks, it sucks. And too many times I think people will call me and say, hey, Sean, you know what the campaign should do? And I'm like, great, they've tested it. It doesn't work. And I know that you're a smart person, but they have a ton of money and a ton of data scientists and a ton of researchers and a ton of analytics people. And there are times when our gut tells us to do something. And one of the things that, to your question, that if you haven't been in a campaign, you want to fight a battle that's like, hey, sorry, the data says it's not going to work. Or, hey, we sent that fundraising piece out, it raised no money. And so it's not going to work. Or, that venue is horrible because X, Y, and Z. And too many times some people get like, a bone and won't let it go because they're like, I think it's going to be awesome. It's just, sorry, it's not going to happen. And so that's where sometimes professionals can say, we tried this in 86 or 92, and here's why it was a disaster. So great questions. Thank you. I don't mean to rush. Stephanie Fisher, thank you for joining us. Tell us who you are, where you are, and what's on your mind.
Once we unmute you.
I'm in Minnesota. I actually had walls as a teacher in high school.
Oh my God.
So,
what class?
Awesome. Yeah. All right, Beth, do you have a good story before you say anything else?
I don't. He is a nice guy. I'm not voting for him though. I'm a 3-time
What
Trump.
class?
I graduated in 2003 and he was teaching at that time. So I don't remember when he left, but he'll be in my town this Friday, I believe. Maybe I've heard he's going to be at the homecoming game at the high school. So I won't be attending. My question is about, I'm still just in shock about that when I heard she went on Call Her Daddy before even doing a press conference. I didn't even believe that was true because I was so like, I just think it's kind of depraved. And I'm worried about Christians who are not, I've heard that Christians are just not going to show up to vote because there isn't a true pro-life candidate. And I'm kind of hoping that appearance kind of, I don't know, wakes people up. Like, to me, it was like
can you explain without, let's keep this PG, but explain to people who might not have a background in why you have that concern, what you mean by that. Like what if someone just hears a podcast called Call Her Daddy, what is your concern with that?
Well, I mean, I have a daughter and I've listened to that podcast just out of curiosity, and it's just about sex and being promiscuous. And so to me, it's the women who listen to that podcast, they're using like 80% of abortion is for birth control. It's not for the exceptions they always talk about in commercials, rape, incest, life of the mother. Of course, I believe in those, but I just feel like it's just promoting cultural rot that I don't, want.
Okay. Thank you. Do you have a question for us?
Well, I'm just wondering if you think that I've been hearing that Christians are just going to hand her the White House by just staying home because Trump is moderate on the abortion issue. He's not pro-life like he was last time around.
Yeah, I would argue that he's not moderate. He's more everywhere. He's trying to be right. He's more, and I hope that Christians who believe in this issue don't stay home. I know that there is talk of doing that. I think he did a great job with the judge issue in 2016, and he had a great record on it. So hopefully, if this is an issue that's important to you, as it is for me, that you you look at his record and maybe overlook what it takes to get back to the White House, and he will govern like he did for 4 years. That's the only message I can have. But I get your concern, because I hear it, that people are saying, well, you know what, let's send a message that we can't be taken for granted. Hopefully that's not true. So thank you for doing that. Unless Dan wants to weigh in, I'm going to potentially make a massive fatal mistake and ask Mr. Chris Simmons to come in and close us out. Chris, please don't prove me wrong. I'm trying to make Mark happy today.
Sean, I want you to know that my comments are not affected by what you just said.
Going after Dan today.
My intended comment was to first of all say that I have a similar opinion of you that I have of W, which is that we don't agree, but I'd love to have a beer with you sometime.
There you go.
I'd love to do that.
And I actually have a two-part question for you, Sean.
Okay.
Number one, because I know you're a skilled communications expert. To what extent do you, first part is, to what extent do you think Kamala's body language and facial expressions undermine her content? Because I think she needs a real good coach on body language and laughing, control, timing, and a whole bunch of other stuff about body language, one. And two, and you may not really want to answer this one because it helps the other side if they ever got it right. Why is it that you think that certain Democrats, including some young blacks, are susceptible to being told that the Democrats didn't advance their agendas, when in fact it's the Republican Senate and the Republican House, the Republican Senate, because they can do the filibuster, that doesn't let the Democrats do what they promised they're going to do? Why are the Dems so pathetic at explaining to their people why things don't get done that they want to get done?
Sean,
Yeah.
I got thoughts on that part that I'll, but
okay. All right. So
yeah,
and I'll keep this tight. So first of all, thank you for your initial comments. I would say this. I agree with Dan on, like, I've watched Kamala. In fact, there was an ad that she just had on, that one where she stands up. I don't know if all of you've seen it. I think we played at one point where she says, I don't know if you've seen the negative ads, but that can be expected of, blah, blah, blah. Here's my record. She comes across, I think, much more authentic then, right? And Dan's point, when she did those post-Biden ones, politicians, when you talk about, you mentioned W, right? W, Bob Dole, even Romney, he did that documentary after the campaign. When they're not in the spotlight and have some camera on them, they're very personable. They come across differently. Some politicians freeze, for lack of a better word, and their minds are going a million miles an hour. If I say this, then this is going to and they can't be themselves, understandably. And that's what happens when you're trying to second guess your own policies and saying, okay, if I say this, then I'm going to alienate this group. I'm going to say this, I'm going to alienate that group. And you're constantly unable to have a real moment. And I think that when Kamala does those, whether it's in ads or interviews, it comes across very different than The View. Dan was right. She looked like, she had bug eyes, like, oh my God, I can't believe you just asked me this and I don't know how to answer. And it was, again, a predictable question from a friendly audience. So I would say to her, the one thing I'll tell you, and I'll leave it at this, you have to practice. And I would just sit there and say, have conversations, put a camera on you. And I want to show you what I'm talking about. When I asked you about this, watch your face, you froze. And too many politicians go, I don't want to do that. And it's a very difficult thing, but I force clients to go through that. And I'll say, I want you to see what your face looked like. I want to see your body movements. I want to see you show what that laugh looked like, because, everyone in the room went like that. And you go, okay, I get it now. And people do that to me. When I started the first show I did after I left the White House, we brought in a coach and she was like, I want to show you some clips. And I was like, oh crap, I do say that all the time. I do have that verbal tick. I do this with my hand over and over, right? And you start to see those things, but a good team, and she's got a good team around her, should stop her and say, and I think part of this, Chris, goes back to the compressed schedule. Like, you build that rapport over time when you're on the bus and you go, hey, that was funny. Let me tell you this. But I've had a lot of bosses over the year. It takes a while to get the confidence to walk in and say, hey, that wasn't your best performance. Let me show you why, and here's how we can improve it. The last thing I would just say is, I think we're doing better with Black young men in particular, because I think that there is a sense, not just among young black men, but among Gen Z in general, and a little bit higher on that scale of this sense of independence. I don't want the government to control things. I love being able to be a YouTube creator. I love being all this. And I keep hearing that you are telling me that I have to fit in this box, or that this is what right. And if we were winning Black men or Latinos, I'd say it would be a different story, but we're going from like 12 to 21. And I think that's just a natural, there's enough of a group in that belt of Gen Zers that identify more as Gen Z than maybe with their race, if that makes sense, right? They're saying, all my buddies are telling me I can make $1 million if I do this and that. And then I hear all this government stuff. I think that's part of it, is that the Democrats are treating things very monolithically and saying, this is what we're going to do. And Republicans are like, hey, we want to give you freedom and let you do what you want to do. And that's a big theme when I ask young kids today, my kids' age, what they want to do. It's not the same professions that I grew up on, right? We want to be doctors and lawyers and professionals and whatever. And they're like, I want to be a YouTube creator and I want to set up this, affiliate store. I mean, like they have a very different set of professions that are based on technology and freedom and lack of suppression. And I think that's where I think we have a probably a little bit better message for younger people. And you're seeing it not just in that demographic, but in the Harvard polls among all young folks. So there's growth in that. Dan?
Chris, this is something that I think is going to get talked about a lot, regardless of the outcome. I was at the Congressional Black Caucus dinner in 2016 when Barack Obama got up on the stage and told the audience that was 90% Black, you need to vote for Hillary Clinton for me. And several people afterwards said it was incredibly offensive. And I think one of the things that Trump has done very well, and that the Democratic Party is not, Trump is speaking to them. He is going to where they consume their information. He is talking about I want to get you, a job in services. I want to make it easier. I don't want to tax tips. I don't want to tax overtime. I, am going to redo free trade deals. And Democrats just kind of say hey, remember when we did this for you? This is the problem the party's having with organized labor, right? The leadership is for the Democratic Party. The rank and file is increasingly for Trump and for Republicans more broadly, right? And the party looks at itself and says, but wait a second, you should be for us. And I think it's a huge problem. Latinos have been saying this now for about 6 to 8 years. All you talk about is immigration. Trump's terrible. You should be for us. Trump says hey, I run hotels. I employ a lot of people. Here are the 5, 6 things that I'm going to do. I want to do for you. I understand you. The Democratic Party doesn't speak to people like this. And it's a problem. If they're going to win, they're going to have to figure out how to communicate a lot better. And specifically with young men, the party is focused on turning out women right now, right? They are going to drive that gender gap. She goes on Alex Cooper, because I happen to know a lot of women in New York City and other places that love that podcast, right? She is not going on Theo Vaughn. She's not playing golf with, Bryson DeChambeau, not that, she needs to play golf. But Howard Stern was a little tip of the cap to that, but his audience isn't young, men as much anymore. But, it's a problem. And I think it's the Democratic Party fault that we're not speaking to people and being respectful about why you should vote for us and what we will do for you.
Yeah. And I mean, I think that to your point, the issues, right? That there are things that they care about differently. Anyway, Chris, thank you for joining us again. We've gone very, very late, and I appreciate that. I taking advantage of Mark's absence. Also that we did have some technical problems. I appreciate everybody who stayed with us through those, and you will be rewarded. I will send you his Venmo, and you can just send him a request. He will pay all of them out. Anyway, thank you guys for being here tonight. Mark has another two-way that he will be on. Donald Trump and Kamala Harris both. Oh no, wait, I got that wrong. It's just the pictures. I thought he was having Donald Trump and Kamala Harris, but it's actually Zachary Karabell will be with him at 6 o'clock tonight. If you want to, you can choose how you want to do this. If you want to watch Mark live and watch me later, that's fine, or vice versa. But at 6, I have the Road to 270. I've mentioned this before. I'll fill in every state in the country on my YouTube channel. And then, by the way, real quick plug, because I can today only. Sunday night, we're doing a 7 o'clock live Road to 270. We're bringing in guests from every single state you name it, we're bringing them in and saying what's going on the ground there, state by state. So it's not just the polling numbers, it's the early vote, the registration numbers, with politicals from every state. So, and you're right, Valerie, it's a shameless plug, but guess what? No one lets me drive in the future. So you take it.
You've earned it. You've earned it.
Thank you.
Let's go Mets tonight. And as the NHL season kicks off, let's go Rangers. So.
All right. Thank you guys for joining us. We'll all be back here tomorrow at 9. Mark will be here at 6. I'll be at 6 on my channel. And thank you for sticking with us. Have a great day.